We're going to do a little tutorial now on some sample test questions. The sample test questions come from the WebCT. Go to the course homepage in the Deformation and Mountain Building folder, and there's a link to sample test on geologic structures. So we'll do the ones on the folds. And this first one, it says, refer to the map below. The limestone is the oldest rock unit, shale is next oldest, sandstone's the youngest. What type of fold is depicted? So this is a geologic map. Wants to know what kind of fold is in the subsurface. So the first thing you can see is that the different rock units, the limestone with the brickwork pattern, the shale with the dashes, and the sandstone with the stipple pattern, they are on the map in parallel bands. When you have a geologic map where the different rock units have parallel bands, or their outcrop patterns are parallel bands, that means that there's either an anticline or a syncline in the subsurface, a non-plunging fold. So we just have to figure out whether it's an anticline or a syncline. We don't have any strike or dip symbols on the map, so we have to go by the relative ages of the rocks. It said the limestone was the oldest one, sandstone's the youngest, and we see the limestone exposed in the center of the fold along the fold axis. The fold axis is going to cut this band into two equal halves, right, with the other rock formations cropping out on either side. So if we have the oldest rock exposed along the axis of the fold, that means there's an anticline in the subsurface. It's the other way around for synclines. Synclines are going to have the youngest rock exposed along the fold axis. This one has the oldest rock along the fold axis, so it's an anticline. All right, that's how you work that one. Now let's look for another question. Oh, the next one is also a map, and it's a question about a fold. It says refer to the map below, this one. The limestone, okay, this time it's the youngest. Shale is older and the sandstone is oldest. What type of fold it's asking about. This time the different rock units aren't showing up on the map in parallel bands. Instead, their outcrop pattern wraps around, like the shale's outcrop pattern, it wraps around the limestone. When you see the rock formations wrapping around in concentric rings or bands, you know there's either a basin or dome in a subsurface. So the structural basin, that's a structure where the rocks in the center are warped downward. The structural dome, the rocks in the center of the dome are pushed upward from below. And so in the basin, we're going to expect to see the youngest rocks in the center of the basin. In the dome, we expect to see the oldest rocks exposed in the center of the dome. In this case, we got the limestone in the center, and the question said the limestone is youngest. Okay, youngest rock exposed in the center must be a structural basin. Right, we don't have any strike and dip symbols on this map either, so have to go by the relative ages of the rocks. Just like the syncline has the youngest rock exposed in the center, the syncline is a kind of downward structure. Basin is a downward structure, except it's down in a center area. So we expect to see the youngest rock exposed along the center of the basin. I think there's one more question about folds. Okay, this one here. It's another map. Refer to the map below. What type of fold is depicted? On this geologic map, oh, yet again, no strike and dip symbols. We're going to have to go by the relative ages of the rocks. And uh-oh, I didn't tell you these terms. We didn't go over these terms like Devonian, Mississippian, Pennsylvanian, and Permian. There are different periods, geologic periods in the Paleozoic, but Devonian's the oldest of the ones listed. Permian's the youngest. So we got a Devonian conglomerate on the map. That's the oldest of all the rock formations shown on the map. And the sandstone with the stipple pattern here, that's the youngest one. So let's look at the way these different rock units are cropping out on the map. They're cropping out in a V-shaped outcrop pattern like the shale. Cropping out in this V-shaped pattern. The limestone has the V-shaped pattern. So when we see a V-shaped outcrop pattern on the geologic map, we have to think about there being a plunging fold in the subsurface, either a plunging anticline or a plunging syncline. We can just rule out the basin or the dome. We don't see the rock formations wrapping around a central area. Okay, so let's figure out if it's a plunging anticline or a plunging syncline. If it's a plunging anticline, we're going to see the oldest rocks exposed along the axis of the anticline. If it's a plunging syncline, we're going to see the youngest rocks exposed along the axis of the plunging syncline. The trick here is, where is the fold axis? It's right down the center. It's going to cut the V in the outcrop pattern like of the shale. It's going to cut that V into 2 equal halves. So the sandstone is along the axis of the fold, and then as you go away, you go over the shale and the limestone. And we look at our key here. Our key to the symbols tells us that the sandstone that we see in the center, it's the youngest of the rock formations shown, so the fold must be a plunging syncline.